Visit the Chatsworth estate in Derbyshire.
Welcome to a special edition of In the Country. We've come to a part of England that's absolutely stuffed with history and tradition. And as well as that, there's farming and forestry and wildlife, all flourishing in this lovely vale that shelters beneath the moorlands there. It is a superb, breathtaking view, isn't it?
It's absolutely breathtaking, Phil, yes. And although I'm fascinated to see the house and gardens and parkland, the thing which is going to interest me is finding out how the farming works, because I once managed a small estate compared with this one, and although I'm sure the numbers of people through the house might be important economically, in this day and age I'm quite sure that the farms have to pay their way, and not only pay but also fit in with access to the countryside and the conservation of this historic parkland. Because I've known the present Duchess of Devonshire for some years, Phil. She was president of the Rare Breed Survival Trust when I was founder chairman. So we have a like interest in farm breeds of livestock. And I'll be very interested to see hers. And although looking in from outside, some people might think that she is just indulging her hobby with her livestock, I'm sure that they have to pay their way as well.
Yeah. Well, we've chosen as our vantage point to get a bird's eye view of the whole estate, this hunting tower that was built for Bess of Hardwick 400 years ago. And if that doesn't give you a clue to where we are, well, we're at Chatsworth in Derbyshire, and we've come at the end of the tourist season to see what keeps these great estates ticking. And down below us, in the private garden, her own private garden, the Duchess is just showing Angela her treasure.
Of course, when we came to Chatsworth today, we were able to drive here on a network of very fine roads. But when your ancestors first moved here, it must have been a pretty wild and woolly place to get to.
Well, that it certainly was. Really, until fairly lately, I suppose. And Defoe described it as being a waste and howling wilderness with neither hedge, house, nor tree.
But I would think it also took an enormous amount of taming to get the countryside to look like this, didn't it?
Yes, that's happened, I think, over about 300 years of various people being very interested in the look of the place.
Among them, Capability Brown.
Capability Brown, who wrecked the garden but made the park very beautiful.
I suppose really, though, the great influence here in the gardens must have been Joseph Paxton.
Yes, he came much later. He arrived when he was only 23, and he was made head gardener at that age, and he arrived on a coach at 4 in the morning and climbed over all the garden walls, set the men to work, and got engaged to the housekeeper's daughter before 8.
One wonders what he did after breakfast.
Good morning's work.
I'll say. Well, I'll be talking to your husband about Paxton's work and the things that he's left here, the legacy and the garden, a little later in the programme. But one of the nice things, I think, about the house is that every generation has made a contribution to the gardens. And the bit that we're standing in now is really your contribution, isn't it? Tell us something about how this came to be made out.
Well, this is the architectural plan of the ground floor of Chiswick House. I was looking at those plans one day at Chiswick, and it suddenly came to me that it might suit in this bit of the garden, which has never been very satisfactory. And you see, the pond is the dome in the plan, the dome at Chiswick. And these are all the rooms and the round bits of the staircases. And it's all done in this rather old-fashioned looking golden box, as you see.
And of course, this is a part of the garden that visitors won't see because it's really your own private garden, isn't it?
That's right. This is a bit that's always been the private bit. And it's just a sort of long, narrow tunnel, really, but it's very nice to have a place where you can be on your own.
You have, what is it, 300,000 people who come to the garden and the house in every year, and many, many more in the park. And of course it is run as a commercial estate, isn't it? And I know that Joe and Phil are going to be looking at that aspect of Chatsworth a little later in the programme. But it's something you feel quite strongly about, isn't it? That it shouldn't just be a chocolate box house, but a working estate.
Oh, yes, very much. But it's always been the same, you see. I think that the house has always been supported by the farms and the forestry and all the other things that go on round about.
David, that's a beautiful flock of mules, which to me add to the beauty of the estate, but I can see situations occurring where commercial farming actually clashes in an amenity parkland like this.
Yes, it does. The Duke and Duchess are very keen that the public should use the 3 parks here. That means that we're restricted to an extent in farming,
Yes.
mainly to grazing.
Yes, yes. And the parkland is about 800 acres. What's the scale of the whole estate?
35,000 acres, and we farm in hand land about 6,000 acres.
Yes. I know that Her Grace is particularly interested in certain aspects of the farming particularly, and one of them is the Jersey herd. How does that fit in with the commercial farming?
Well, it fits in with the other 2 dairy herds. There's two Frisian herds, and then the Jersey herd. The Jersey herd is based at the shop, the farm shop.
Yes. Because I've always noticed that people often think of Jerseys as just pretty animals that aren't really commercial, but I happen to have a great respect for them because I milked Jerseys when I was a pupil. And I suppose the fact that they produce such high-quality milk actually fits in very well to a farm shop situation.
Yes, it does. We make yogurt, cream, and, of course, cheese. In fact, it uses about 25% of the output of the Jerseys.
I can see that you obviously have to market a lot of your farm produce into the general market, but some of it goes through the farm shop. But, I mean, it isn't a very big amount, is it? It must only just be for the people who live on the estate.
Oh, no, goodness me, no. It's a large enterprise. After all, we have flocks of 3,000 ewes. Lambs go through at the rate of something like 40 to 50 a week. And from the beef unit, we supply something like 4 to 5 beasts a week.
So the Duchess is particularly keen on the farm shop, but she also has other personal interests in the farming, doesn't she?
Oh, yes, she has Haflinger ponies, Shetlands, and, of course, the Jacob sheep.
Oh, yes.
On, steady. Gone.
You know, the great trick is not to get it moving too fast, because what a lot of people do is to get the dog moving so fast that it gets the sheep going, and then it's harder to stop than to start. You see a lot of farmers who do nothing else handling dogs a lot worse than that. I'm very impressed by that.
Nice and calm, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're lovely looking sheep, aren't they?
Well, that was a very creditable demonstration.
Yeah.
How many out of
Thank
10
you
for that,
very
Phil?
Oh, we got 10 out of 10 for that. Most impressive. I thought that was very good.
Thank you very much.
How did you come to have sheep here, these Jacob sheep here at Chatsworth?
Well, they've been here a long, long time. The first recording of them was 1839, but I think they were here long before that.
As a commercial flock?
No, I think as park ornaments, like deer.
And why did you decide to keep a flock like this yourself?
Well, they've always been here, and they're a great interest, and now, of course, they've become very commercially good because they're put on the map by the Jacob Sheep Society, and there's lots of them, and they go very well.
It's very nice to see you working dogs so professionally. It was jolly good. I was really most impressed by that, because you see so many farmers that wouldn't be as that. They're rough as anything at home, and they get the dogs going like anything and can't slow their sheep down. And I was most impressed by that.
Oh, that's
Have you
very
always
nice.
been keen on dogs?
Well, I've always had dogs, but this is the first sheepdog I've ever had. It's far the cleverest dog I've ever had. Far.
Do you have him in the house?
Oh, yes, in my room at night and all.
Does he really?
Yes, maybe that's not a very good thing for a working dog.
I don't subscribe to this. I think that the more a dog's with you, the more intelligent it becomes, and I don't subscribe to this story.
Yeah, I think you're right, because they really know what you're thinking before you thought it, or these dogs do.
Mm. It's a wonderfully well-wooded estate. John, how important is the forestry enterprise commercially?
Well, it's very important, Wilders. It is coming to the stage now where we've got a lot of areas coming into production after a very long period of investment. And as you see here, we've got the first operation on this top side here of the thinning, which is mainly for the steak market. And this is the sort of least remunerative but essential part of the process. And every 5 years from now on, we will be harvesting a crop from here. So, and this will increase as time goes on with the volume and hopefully the price that we're going to get for it too.
And the bigger trees that are coming down, they form these butts here. What are these going to be?
Well, again, this is a slightly older crop, the larch crop on the lower side, and so we've got a wider scope of markets. The butt lengths, in fact, are going as pit props, which is, at the moment, an intermittent trade, but the remainder of the larch is also very good for fencing material.
What about the sheer amenity woodlands? Because you've got some marvellous hardwoods. Do you have to replace those? How do you cover that?
Oh, yes. In fact, the area behind Chatsworth House was at one time a completely bare escarpment, and it was the sort of inspiration and work of not only the various dukes but people like Capability Brown that landscaped this as a backdrop to Chatsworth House. And it is obviously important that this is maintained. So again, it's a question that where we've got areas in the wood now which are over mature, we have to take out literally individual trees and replant. And we're trying to replant with indigenous species, as this is a special area. We feel it should maintain the character and act as a backdrop still to Chatsworth.
I think it's quite clear, so you know, that Paxton wasn't just a great gardener and an engineer, but he was also a man of enormous vision, wasn't he?
He was indeed. It's fair to say he was a genius, he was a great gardener, he was a leader. He not only built the Crystal Palace, became a member of Parliament, and we owe him a great deal. This greenhouse is the last one we've got designed and built by him, and it's a source of great joy to my family every year, particularly these two giant camellia reticulata.
Of course, he left you an enormous legacy of plants in this garden, didn't he?
He did indeed. He laid the sort of foundation of the modern garden, and he also collected a very splendid selection of different kinds of trees, and which are all in the arboretum at the far end of the garden.
It's a marvellous piece of engineering, this
It is,
isn't
it is. He called it his conservative wall. Why he called it that, I'm not quite sure. Perhaps conservatory, but possibly some political connotation. And it grows peaches, nectarines, apricots, but alas, I cannot get many figs to grow. I've done my best. Now, you've met Butlink.
Yes, indeed, we have. The sort of present-day Mr. Paxton, really, aren't
yes,
you?
Right, yes,
Yes.
34 years head gardener and in the garden for 50 years.
That's right, yes, that's correct, Your Grace. I came in 1925. I was 19 then, and His Grace was about 5-year-old. And he tells me he couldn't give me the sack because I caught him in the act of with a bunch of grapes out of the winery.
Well, pinching them when nobody was looking.
That's it, yes. The head gardener wasn't about that time. I was only a lad then.
I think the marvellous legacy of this place is that not only have you had marvellous gardeners like Paxton and like Bert here, but the family themselves, you've all been very keen gardeners too, haven't you?
We've been very lucky, yes. We have the, right back, the 4th Duke laid out the gardens. 6th Duke was a great gardener, my grandmother was a great gardener, and my father was a very keen and very expert gardener. So
and indeed, are you yourself?
No, I'm a bad amateur. My daughter, elder daughter, is very good, and when she's about, I just keep quiet about gardening.
But of course, you've all made an impression on the place, haven't you? And we were just there looking at Paxton's conservatory, or conservative, and over here is the newest addition, isn't it? This marvellous new greenhouse.
Well, it's very nice of you to say so. We are very pleased with it, and we like the modern design, compares with Paxton's and the other greenhouses, and the tropical part contains Paxton's lily, the first flowered here, so we've kept a link with the past.
Very, very nice, Dick, to see a herd of red deer as tame as this, these park deer. I suppose it's partly because you've got this very tame hind that acts as a decoy, is
this
it?
This is a very favourite old deer, which is about 10 years old. And actually she's out of a park-bred deer that's also up in the woods now, and she's very old.
Is she?
And believe it or not, she has a name. We call her Sarah.
It's a great thing to have a tame hind like Sarah. I've got a little tame fallow deer, and she acts as a decoy and brings ours up. How many have you got in total in the herd, Dick?
Between 60 and 70. I'm not just certain to one or two. There may be one or two in the bracken that I haven't counted, but I've certainly had 60 here the other day, and I knew that there were at least 3 or 4 elsewhere.
When do you count them?
We count them usually the first week in March.
Why? Were any special reason?
Well, for 2 reasons. It's for my own satisfaction to see how many we've got, but further than that, it's for the auditor's benefit.
Well, part of the purpose of having them here, obviously, is to improve the park. They look so lovely, which presumably isn't an asset, but they must be quite a commercial proposition too, are they?
I think they are. Oh, yes, I think venison is catching on in quite a big way. And we've got quite a good demand in our own farm shop for venison.
You've got a pretty high percentage of stags, as far as I could see, to hinds. Most of the ones you take out, I suppose, your surplus are stags. Are you doing anything to produce ones for the future to take over from your big ones?
Yes, I'm going to leave at least one young staggy this time. One that would be normally one that would be culled, but I shall leave one of the best, which I consider to be the best, this time to replace one of the elder ones.
Gradually, by selective breeding, I suppose you'll improve the quality of your own herd too.
Well, we're hoping to. Yes, we're hoping for a good level herd, a good all-round herd.
Now this, the maize, is what, one of the most recent things that you've planted here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think we planted it in 1953, and it's grown very well, but you have to be careful to clip it, because otherwise it gets thin at the bottom.
But of course all this looks as if it's been here for years, the flower beds and indeed the maize. But what we ought to be able to see here was Paxton's great greenhouse.
Yes, indeed we ought. All we can see is the wall in front of us, which is the original wall, and from the top of it, the glass sprang, and that's it. So it gives us an idea of the size of the great greenhouse.
But it wasn't just any old greenhouse, was it? This was his prototype, if you like, for the Crystal Palace.
Yes, I think that's fair. This was, it wasn't a bad prototype, but I think he tried it out on this and then went on to greater and larger things.
There's a lovely story, isn't there, that he got his idea for the structure of the Crystal Palace from the strength and the structure of the veins on the Victoria lily leaf.
That is absolutely true. I was brought up on that story, and I've taken trouble to check with the highest authorities, and that is the case. He found out the strength. There's an old wives' tale that one of his small children was made to sit on it to see how strong it was. That I can't vouch for. But it is certainly true that the structure of those leaves gave him the idea for this greenhouse, and hence the Crystal Palace. So it all came from the lily.
We can't see it because your grandfather blew it up, didn't he, in the 1920s?
Yes, he did. In 1921, I think he was right. A great many of the plants had died because there wasn't the fuel to keep the heat up, and it was very expensive, and it was a time for retrenchment and economy. I'm always rather grateful to him for doing it, because it would have certainly had to have gone after the Second World War, and at least that was something that I can't be accused of being vandalism.
But it would have made a lovely thing to see, wouldn't it, as you come through this arch?
It would be simply lovely. And then if you stood on the top of that arch, you were on eye level with the second tier of the greenhouse.
Because I'm often criticised for bringing French Ardennes horses in to work on the farm. But I think they happen to fit my situation. What made you choose the Austrian Haflinger?
Well, when I first heard of a Haflinger, I thought it was a car. And our forester wanted something to work in the woods. And there was a German friend of ours who lived near here, and he said, I know what you want, a Haflinger.
Yes.
So we went to Austria and saw them and fell for them.
And you brought them back to this country?
Yes, in 1969 that was.
Yes. And are they always this lovely colour?
Yes, they're always chestnut of varying degrees, and they have to have flaxen mane and tail.
Yes. And you call them a pony or a horse?
Well, we call them ponies. In Austria, they call them horses.
And in Austria, presumably they were a working man's working horse on the farm?
Oh, they certainly were. On those very steep little farms, tiny farms, they did all the work, and they were the only source of power, usually.
Yes, you can see by those shoulders that he's a real pulling machine, isn't he?
Immensely strong.
Yeah. What sort of role do you see the breed playing in this country today?
Well, I think the temperament is the great thing, and the ride and drive possibilities. They're real family ponies. They can carry a big man, and they're very quiet with the children.
Yes, and now, of course, a quiet, strong pony is perfect for this handicap riding, which is so popular.
They're using a lot of these for that, especially for the grown-ups, because they can carry a weight.
Yes, wonderful. And are you still working them on the estate at all?
There's one working in the woods now.
Yes.
But it's difficult to find any of the humans in the woods who know how to look after a horse.
I'm finding this on the farm, of course. There aren't the farm men about who are used to working with working horses anymore. Well, I feel very strongly that there's still a place for the working horse in British farming and forestry, so let's hope that this breed plays its part in the future.
Well, let's hope. They're certainly very nice to work with.
This is an absolutely marvellous setting for a lake up here,
Yes, no doubt about that.
But it does look a bit to me as if it is artificial from all this stone bank, is it?
Yes, it was built by the 6th Duke, or at least Paxton anyway, built it for the 6th Duke. And as you can see on 3 sides, it's been built up with stonework. So it was a marvellous operation when it was done, it must have been.
Superb, yes. Most of the visitors that come here, they're absolutely entranced by the waterworks always at Chatsworth. And it's very exciting to me to be able to come behind the scenes and have a look at what goes on in order to make those possible. And it's obviously a jolly large lake. It's an extraordinary thing to do in modern times with bulldozers, to think of doing something on this scale with men with picks and shovels and horses and carts. Absolutely extraordinary.
They must have worked all the daylight hours possible, I think,
and a lot of the day, a lot of the darkness too, I think.
Yes.
Where does the water come into?
Over in that direction. It comes from way up on the moors at the back over there.
How far do they bring it across the moors?
Well, the actual conduit that was, or drain that was made is 2.5 miles long.
Now, this is the sort of control works, obviously, of the outlet.
That's right. It from here, it carries on and feeds the waterworks below down at the house.
Down there? Oh, can we go and have a look at that?
We can do.
You know, Ash, boys of all ages love playing with fowl and water. The old Duke and his gardener must have had a whale of a time channeling it all over the estate. Is this the next stage from the Emperor Paul?
Yes, this is called the Sauter Stone, and you see it makes a nice waterfall over the top, and it carries on over the aqueduct down into the cascade pond to the house and on down the steps, as you can see. The main supply, which is coming from the lake up there, really carries on in a pipe, carries on into the gardens and is used later.
Of course, looking back from the house, it makes a marvellous view. Looking right back here too, they really did succeed on that, didn't they?
What the 6th Duke did leave you and your family, of course, is this mature parkland, but trees die, so you always have to be thinking ahead for the future, and I know that you're now planting, as it were, for the 21st century, aren't you?
Well, that indeed is true. Both my wife and I are very keen on keeping park going with trees, and here we have fine old beeches, 180 years old, or perhaps a bit less, coming to the end of their days, alas, and so we've planted to take their place in due course those which I suppose are about 20 years old. When these do finally have to go, they at least will be coming on, so there's something there to take their place.
You have to have enormous imagination, don't you? Because when you put them in, they're just tiny little saplings.
You've got to try and site them right, and also not plant them too close together, because when they look so small, you can't believe they're going to grow into feed that size one day.
But obviously, when your son and his son and his son after him come here, they'll be saying, those are the trees that the Indians still planted.
If they do, if they do come.
This Cascade House here, Ash, it's a truly magnificent building, isn't it? I suppose really that it's the beginning of the formal work.
Yes, and more or less the beginning of the responsibilities as far as I'm concerned.
Well, what do your responsibilities consist of exactly?
Well, at the back of the house here, there's the valve controls. They have to be repaired. Some of the stonework has, from time to time, to be attended to. And also the roof at the top there. The lead is getting rather worn, and that's got to be repaired in the near future.
Considering the amount of water that it had slurped over it for centuries, it's in remarkably good repair, isn't it?
It is that. There's very little wear considering the number of gallons that must have gone over it in all that time.
Yes. It's a wonderful exercise in sort of really good hydraulics, because so much of it must have been a bit sort of hit and miss in those days. Very practical exercise, isn't it?
It is that, because it's used twice after this. When it reaches the bottom, it goes into a tank and then on to the Seahorse Fountain. From there underground onto the south front, there is another fountain, and then on into the river. So as you say, it's been used 3 or 4 times.
What about the house? Is it used in the house still?
No, not this water. We have our own cold springs. We have 2, one supplying the house and one supplying the stables. And also over here we have the jack pond, the jack pond, which is turn the spit on the jack, cooking the beast and the kittens in the old days.
Far better than using a little dog as a turn spit.
I should think so, yes.
So that the whole of the spectacular waterworks that we've seen all down the Cascade, just the overflow from the Emperor Pool.
Ah, but you've missed something.
What was that?
The large pipe in the ring pond.
That enormous great cast iron pipe.
Yes, it comes right down and feeds into this chamber here.
So there's a pipe here that goes right up half a mile, more than half a mile up to the Emperor
top,
Pool.
Yes, it does.
And what happens after this chamber?
It goes on from here and feeds the Emperor Fountain.
That's that fountain over there?
That's correct.
Well, what's the significance
The
of
Emperor
that?
Fountain was put in by the 6th Duke, because
Yeah.
he'd seen one in Russia, and he came back and he wanted one much bigger and better. So this is the Emperor Fountain.
Let's have a look at the works inside. Absolutely marvellous. A huge, great pipe inside, bigger than you'd see in a liner. And how do you get the water from there to the fountain?
Well, we turn it on by this with this key.
What's it like for both of you running a home in the middle of this very commercial enterprise?
Well, I think the first thing is there's nothing new. They've been coming for 200 years or more. It's more commercial now, but there's nothing new in having people in house and garden.
We've just been having a marvellous look at this. I'm absolutely lost in wonderment at the scale of this fountain. What happened when the Tsar did see it?
Well, alas, we'll never know, because at the last minute he chucked and didn't come. Oh, in that case, perhaps Angela could turn it on so that we can see it now.
With that one, yes?
This is the one.
Right, am I going to manage this on my own, do you think, Ash? There we go. Oh, good heavens above, Ash, I'm never going to manage it. That's better. There we go. Oh, dear. I don't suppose the Tsar would have had to do this. That's why he didn't come.
Shall I continue?
Better.
Started.
Oh, there she goes.
Oh, super. Everything. Fabulous, isn't it?
Isn't
I
that
bet that wiped his eye, Joe.
Charlie, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's why you love it.
Isn't it?
Yeah.